When we think about what makes us healthy, our minds usually go straight to things like genes, diet, and exercise. But what if the biggest factors aren't inside our bodies at all? Today, we're going to dig into the social side of sickness, how the world around you can literally determine how well and how long you live.
So let's just jump right in with a huge question. Does your zip code matter more than your genetic code? I know it sounds a little crazy, right? But as you're about to see, where you happen to live can have an absolutely staggering impact on your life. And we're not just talking about the difference between one neighborhood and the next. This is a global story. Let's kick things off with a tale of two worlds, where the country you're born into can mean the difference between a long, full life and one that's cut tragically short.
Just look at this. A baby born today in Monaco can expect to live to be 89 years old. But a baby born in Afghanistan? Just 54. Let that sink in for a second. That's a 35-year gap in life itself, determined just by geography. It's wild.
And just so we're all on the same page here, when we say life expectancy, what we're talking about is the average number of years a baby born today can expect to live. It's a really simple number that tells a super powerful story about a country's overall health and well-being.
All right, now let's bring the story home to the United States, because the U.S. presents this really fascinating and, honestly, troubling puzzle, what some people call the American health paradox.
Get this. The U.S. spends more money on healthcare per person than any other country on the planet. In 2022, we're talking almost $13,500 for every single man, woman, and child. So you'd think we'd have the best health outcomes in the world, right? Well, it's just not that simple.
Because despite all that massive spending, nearly 8% of the population, that's about 26 million people, didn't have any health insurance at all in 2022. That means millions of us are just one bad accident or one serious illness away from a total financial disaster.
And it's not just about insurance or access to doctors. The U.S. is grappling with public health crises that you can't just throw money at to solve. Take gun violence, for example. In 2023 alone, the country saw 656 mass shootings.
And this chart, wow, this really puts it into perspective. It shows just how much of an outlier the U.S. is. Look at the rate of gun homicides compared to other wealthy nations like Canada or Australia. It's not even in the same ballpark. So what is going on here? What's driving these huge gaps in health, both around the world and right here at home?
Well, to really get to the why, we need a few tools. Sociologists use different ways of looking at the world, different theoretical lenses. So we're going to look through three of them to try and make sense of this whole paradox.
First up is what's called the conflict perspective. It basically argues that to understand our healthcare system, you have to follow the money and the power. This quote really nails the core idea that sometimes financial interests can end up being more important than the well-being of patients.
And if you want a real-world example that'll just make your jaw drop, look at the price of insulin. Humalog, a super common type, cost about $21 back in 1999. By 2019, it had skyrocketed to over $300. For millions of Americans with diabetes, this isn't just a number on a chart, it's a life-or-death decision they have to make every single month. Okay, let's switch gears and look through a completely different lens. This one is called symbolic interactionism. It's all about how we define things, how we label them. And a key concept here is medicalization. That's the process where we take normal human behaviors or life stages and turn them into medical problems that need to be treated.
Just think about it for a second. Childbirth used to happen at home. Now it's a highly medicalized procedure in a hospital. Things like menopause or even being a really energetic kid, which we now might label as ADHD, have become medical conditions. Even the process of dying has moved from the home to the hospital, managed by a team of professionals. And when we reframe things like this, it completely changes how we experience them.
So, we've got these big ideas, these theories, but let's connect them back to the real world. How do these social systems actually, physically make people sick? What are the consequences we can see and feel?
Let's circle back to gun violence for a minute. While it's the mass shootings that always grab the headlines, this chart reveals a much quieter and in many ways more tragic story. The majority of gun deaths in the United States are not homicides, they're suicides. This shows you right away how a public health crisis is tangled up with a massive mental health crisis.
And it's not just about access to weapons, it's also about who is most at risk. Gender, for instance, plays a huge role. In the U.S., women live, on average, almost 6 years longer than men, And part of the reason for that is that social ideas about masculinity often encourage men to take more risks, whether it's on the job, in their behaviors, or by being more exposed to violence.
And hey, remember that big question we started with about your zip code? This right here is a huge piece of the answer. In many low-income areas, you have what are called food deserts, where it is way easier to find a bag of chips or a soda than it is to find an apple or fresh vegetables. This creates a direct line between a person's income and their chances of developing health problems like obesity and diabetes.
Okay, I know, this can all seem pretty bleak, but understanding the problems, really understanding them, is always the first step toward finding solutions. So where do we go from here? What's the path forward?
So how do we try to fix these things? Historically in the US, we've often turned to big, sweeping legislation. This timeline shows some of the major milestones: creating those huge safety nets, Medicare and Medicaid back in the 60s, making sure kids have coverage in the 90s, and, of course, the massive and, very controversial Affordable Care Act in 2010.
The ACA was this gigantic effort to patch the holes in the system. It basically did four main things. It gave states the option to expand Medicaid to cover more people. It created those online marketplaces where you could shop for insurance. It offered financial help to make those plans more affordable. And, this was a huge one, it made it illegal for insurance companies to turn you away just because you had a pre-existing condition.
But here's the thing, just having an insurance card isn't a magic bullet. Take mental health. 1 in every 5 American adults is living with a mental illness, but there's this powerful social barrier, stigma, that very often stops people from even trying to get the help they need. And that's a problem that no law by itself can solve.
And so, we kind of end up right back where we started. Our health, our well-being is so deeply connected to the society we live in, which leaves us with this final, really important question. If our society is what's shaping our health, can we reshape that society to build a healthier future for every single one of us?